Welcome to the UN and Organised Crime. I'm Ian Tennant. Today is the second in our set of episodes focused on environmental crimes and the moves towards a new protocol to address them under the UN Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime, the UNTOC. In today's episode, we will aim to understand why a new protocol to the UNTOC is being promoted by Brazil and other governments in the Amazon region and beyond, and what a new protocol could do for the Amazon and other vital ecosystems. This episode is recorded just ahead of the 35th session of the UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice in Vienna. Although no resolutions have been tabled on environmental crimes this time round, there are many side events and engagements focused on the topic. And that's because in October 2026, again here in Vienna, the UNTOC Conference of Parties will take place, which is likely to be when a decision is made on whether to launch negotiations on a new protocol. So I'm delighted to have with me today two key experts from Brazil. Gustavo Carneiro, an experienced multilateral diplomat from the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His current position is Deputy General Coordinator for the fight against transnational crime. I'm also delighted to be joined today by Melina Russo, Research Director at the Instituto Igarapé. So I'm going to start with Melina from the Igarapé Institute and ask her, as one of the prominent think tanks and research institutions looking at these issues. Is it possible, Melina, to even quantify the threats from environmental crimes in the Amazon? And how have they accelerated in recent years?
Yeah, I think it's possible to quantify different environmental crimes that is happening in the Amazon basin. First of all, it's important to acknowledge that 91% of deforestation in the Amazon basin in Brazil is illegal. And the main drivers are illegal logging, illegal mining, land grabbing, and so on. So there is a huge amount of crimes that we can see affecting the Amazon basin. More than that, some research that we have done shows that we are not talking about crimes that happen in isolation. What we talk about when we talk about environmental crime, it's a really ecosystem of environmental crime because there are different kinds of criminalities intertwined in the region. So, for example, there has been a lot of research showing how illegal mining is really connected with money laundering, with pollution, with violent crime as well. At the same time, when we see as illegal logging, for example, also intertwined with corruption, fraud, money laundering, and so on. We have shown through our research that this is organized crime related ecosystem due to the volume, to the complexity, due to the investment that is needed to commit these kinds of crimes, especially in the Amazon. In terms of some numbers, in terms of volume, what we know so far, because all the legislation in different countries, they are different. So there is not just one methodology that we can measure, but just to have an idea what's happening. In Peru, some of the numbers shows that 50% of all gold exported from Peru is illegal. In Colombia, we have some measures that shows that 85% of the gold exported is extracted illegal. And in Brazil, we had in previous year around 30% of illegality in terms of the gold being extracted, and especially coming from the Amazon. So everything that is happening, all the violence and all the implications that we have to indigenous communities, to local communities in the Amazon, and especially how this is pressing deforestation.
Wow, some astonishing statistics, Melina. Thank you for explaining how you see things. And I think the other thing that comes through strongly is how interconnected a lot of all of these crimes that affect the environments are, including with other forms of organized crime, and very much recognized from the Global Initiative's work, the characterization of this ecosystem of crime that's developed, especially in Amazon. I'm going to go now to Gustavo. Why has Brazil led the way in promoting a new protocol to the UNTOC? And what do you think it could do to address the threats outlined by Melina?
Brazil advocates for the negotiation of an additional protocol to the UNTOC focused on the most relevant forms of environmental crimes that fall within the scope of the convention. illegal mining, trafficking in wild flora and fauna, and waste trafficking. For us, this position is actually a very logical conclusion to the reality we're facing, and one that is also based on the belief Brazil has in multilateralism as a solution for our collective problems. You see, our decision to propose the negotiation of an additional protocol to the UNTOC was taken early 2024, and it took into account the circumstances on the ground and also built on the work of civil society organizations that have advocated for a wildlife protocol for quite some time. As Melina has mentioned, environmental crimes grew substantially in the recent past, and their effects on the environment, communities, indigenous peoples were terrible. Their role on the growth and on the financing of criminal organizations acting in other crimes was also extremely worrying for us. This has led our government to take several domestic and regional actions back in 2023 and 2024 and so. These included increased funding for operations to clear indigenous lands of illegal mining, the creation of a dedicated directorate within the federal police to fight environmental crimes, the creation of an international police cooperation center in the Amazon, as well as the establishment of a special commission under the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, ACTO, to coordinate regional actions against organized crime. So a lot is then being done domestically and regionally. But, and we need to be very clear about that, I think we're talking about offenses committed by criminal organizations of a transnational nature. And that means that domestic or regional actions are necessary, but not enough. It's precisely why the Palermo Convention actually was created back in 2001. There needs to be concerted action at a global level to face these criminals, since the initial stages of the criminal enterprise might be carried out in Brazil or another Amazonian country, but the buyer is somewhere else and the money will be laundered somewhere else. And this makes it very difficult to investigate and prosecute all those involved. And the result is what we have today, that environmental crimes are low risk, high reward activity. Against this backdrop, Ian, it was very clear to us that the Palermo Convention provided many of the necessary tools to fight illegal mining, trafficking in wild flora and fauna, or waste trafficking. We believe an additional protocol to the convention focusing on these crimes would harmonize criminalization legislation across the globe, provide a solid legal basis for international legal and police cooperation, financial investigations, confiscations. But we do need an additional protocol, and we do so urgently, because the effects of these crimes on our environment and our societies can be irreparable.
Thank you, Gustavo, and for outlining not just why you think this international action is necessary, but all the things that the Brazilian government has been doing to respond. I wanted to ask you about the multilateral coalition that Brazil formed, which was launched in Rio last year. Just to say, obviously, the Global Initiative is very proud to be a member of this multilateral coalition, but there's a number of countries that are in that coalition. So I just wondered if you could explain a bit about this coalition and why Brazil decided to launch it in Rio last year, and why you think not just those countries that are being affected, but the broader international community should be interested in this.
Of course. So the Coalition for Multilateral Action Against Crimes That Affect the Environment, that's the name of the coalition. It was launched last November, as you mentioned, in Rio by our Environment Minister, Marina Silva. And that marked an important moment, we think, in this process of launching negotiations on an additional protocol to the UNTOC. So the objective of the coalition is to gather a group of countries committed to the same objective, countries and civil society organizations, and to give political impulse to the proposal at the critical juncture we're at, which is 2026, with the UNTOC COP13 next October. The fact that the group has grown substantially since its launch, it went from 11 to 21 countries and from 2 to 11 civil society organizations, I think shows that there is indeed momentum around the issue. And we believe that as we approach the COP and the proposal becomes more concrete and palpable, the impulse will grow even further. The coalition now has members from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe, which we believe sends an important message of the relevance of the issue across the globe. That has always been our objective. It is not supposed to be a group of countries from the global south. because environmental crimes are not a problem restricted to Global South. They have very concrete effects worldwide, as we mentioned. Aside from the environmental impacts that we've already talked about, which are not restricted by any borders, we're talking about criminal networks that operate in all regions, that finance several other forms of crimes everywhere. Of course, we know that the level of conscience around the seriousness of the problem will differ depending on regional realities. But the fact is that it affects everyone and it demands concerted action at the multilateral level. So that is why we have established the coalition, and we have been sparing no effort to reach out to all countries, to lay out the problem, explain our proposal, hear their views back. And that is what we'll continue to do together with our colleagues from the coalition in order to reach an agreement by October and start the development of an additional protocol to the GI-TOC to fight environmental crimes.
Thank you, Gustavo. We'll certainly be following and supporting as you continue these efforts to engage with as many member states as possible. I'm going to go back to Melina. I think all of us on this episode today are in agreement of the benefits that a protocol could bring in terms of legislation, promoting international cooperation, and harnessing and targeting resources at the places that need it most, like the Amazon. But obviously, there are limits to what a protocol could do. And is there anything that you would like to highlight that we should be focusing on in addition? And what can organizations like ours and civil society and research do to support more international action, whether through a protocol or in other ways?
As we were discussing, this is a really strong and pressing issue that is being used by criminal organizations and transnational criminal organizations to finance different kinds of criminalities. And as the complexities of the conduct, as Gustavo was mentioning, it really depends because every region has different perspective in terms of crimes that affected nature, and they have same conditions but different conducts. So maybe a protocol, it's not going to have all the conducts that is needed when we talk about environmental crime. The nature of the conducts that we are talking about, that they are converging formal market and illegality. And this is a really complex issues that maybe we cannot address everything in terms of a protocol. The other thing, we need civil society to enforce and to apply, because if we have a protocol in the global level, then the implementation still needs to be at the local level, in the nationals, and to understand how this can be applied. I think a protocol can really address some of the problems that we are seeing in terms of the anti-money laundering system. For example, there is not every legislation that has environmental crime as predicate offense, so we limit the capacity of the anti-money laundering system to address this kind of crime. So this can be something that the protocol can address, but still we need more investigation, we need more cooperation. I'll give an example of what we as Igarapé and a civil society organization are doing right now. It's convening different countries in the region to discuss minimal criteria for the first purchase of gold, for example, because this is really different from country to country. And if we can have a set of minimal criteria, then we reduce the loopholes that are happening in the regulation perspective that is really key to address the problem that we are seeing. So this can be expanded to other regions and more globally, so we can have a more harmonic perspective in terms of regulation of these markets to close all the loopholes that we are seeing. So there is different aspects that some research can help. And I give you another example that in Brazil and in Colombia, the Clean Gold program that is run by the federal police in Brazil that apply geology science into criminal law enforcement to understand the origins of gold, for example. I think there is different opportunities to bring science, to bring knowledge, so we can address and tackle environmental crime, that it's growing form of transnational organized crime that is affecting the whole globe and environment.
Thank you, Melina, for outlining some of those issues and again showing the importance of evidence and science and civil society as part of this debate. And we also thank Gustavo and the colleagues from Brazilian government who've also made sure to take account of civil society views in this process, including as members of the Multilateral Coalition. We will finish this podcast there today. We will have more episodes in this series, but just to leave you with the thought that although there's still many months away until we get to October, you can feel the momentum building. The level of conversation and consultation and discussions amongst member states in Vienna around the issue of environmental crimes is more than it's ever been. And we look forward to progress in October, hopefully towards a new protocol and therefore better coordination and action against crimes that affect the environment. So Gustavo, thank you very much. Melina, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. It was a pleasure.